free to utilize the chat box if you have any questions as we move through the meeting. But we have a full agenda today. First, we have the approval of the meeting minutes, followed by public comment, and then we'll get into our action items, which include endorsing activities related to the congestion management process, as well as the candidate list of projects for the regional transportation plan. And we also have some informational items for you regarding an updated schedule to the regional transportation plan, as well as a presentation that will dive into the roadway safety congestions and conditions and trends before wrapping up with our regular reports before adjourning for the meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Reed to get us started.
Good morning. Thanks, Sean. Sean, do you by chance know if we have a quorum yet?
Hey, Mayor Reed, this is Michael. We need 2 more for a quorum, so we'll have to go to the information on it.
If there's anybody who has not signed in to the roll call, if you could do that, then hopefully we will have a quorum. Just some housekeeping items. If you make a motion today or second a motion, if you can make sure that you state your name so we can get that for the record, as well as if you abstain from a vote or vote no, if you also can state your name so we can put that in the minutes as well. Since we do not have a quorum, I'm going to skip over the minutes and we will come back to that, and I will move to item 2, which is our public comment. Our public comment. So if there is anyone here who would like to address this board, you may do so at this time. Seeing no one, I will move on to item, I'm going to skip item 3 at this.
Quorum.
Oh, we've got a quorum now. Perfect. So I'll go back and pick up item 1, which is approval of the June 17th meeting minutes. And are there any additions or corrections that need to be made to those minutes?
Move approval, Madam Chairman. More.
Thank you. And I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second. Kerr.
Thank you. Thank you. And any discussion? All in favor of the passing the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, minutes pass. We've done our public comments. So we have 2 action items today. They are endorsements of items that are going to be in our regional transportation plan. And our first one is the endorsement of activities that are related to the congestion management process. And Sean, I know you have some discussion with this, so I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. So just to recap, at our last meeting, we provided you all with a memo on the congestion management process, provided kind of an overview of where we were in the process and some of the status of those 8 steps within the process and what activities remain. And so since our last meeting, staff has been busy on a lot of activities related to the CMP. And today we're going to cover several updates. A number of those updates will revolve around or focus on 3 technical memorandums that we've prepared. And those focus primarily on documenting steps 4, 6, and 8 of the process. Step 4 being the collection of data and monitoring performance. Step 6 being identifying and assessing strategies, and step 8 evaluating the effectiveness. And so we'll go into a little bit of detail on those today. We're also going to give you a quick recap of the June 19th workshop that we held right after last month's meeting, as well as the policy brief on congestion that document a lot of the steps, a lot of the components of step 5 of the process of analyzing problems and needs that really provide a lot of detail that was presented at that workshop in a document form. And then we'll note some of the remaining activities left, which primarily involves step 7, programming and implementing strategies. So the workshop, as I mentioned, on June 19th, we had great attendance at that, and appreciate those that were able to make it. At that workshop, we were able to present a lot of the future forecasts for growth and development out to 2045, and what that impact is expected to be on the transportation system and performance out to 2045. There is a recording of that workshop if you weren't able to attend, and then opportunity to share feedback on that workshop. In addition, we also released a draft policy brief on congestion, focusing on a lot of the causes of traffic congestion and some of the regional trends and key findings that we presented on at that workshop, as well as identifying some of the mitigation strategies and recommended actions in order to address some of those congestion problems and needs within the region. And this policy brief, I think, will help increase the understanding of not only the causes of congestion, but document some of those trends, as we mentioned, as well as what we expect to see based on future forecasts, so that can guide some of the decision making as we move forward. One thing I'll also mention is that we have updated a congestion data online. A lot of the information that we presented is now available in the congestion management app in our data portal, which will allow you the ability to explore some of these congestion data measures and trends over time on your own and at the specific level of geography that you're interested in. So the focus that we wanted to update you on today is really these tech memos. So the first one is on data collection and monitoring. This is the overview. We'll provide an overview of how we intend to carry out step 4 of the CMP process. As I mentioned, that revolves around data collection and monitoring system performance. This step is really a foundation for some of the other steps that will involve kind of defining congestion, determining those causes, and identifying potential strategies to address those. As we've mentioned in previous meetings, we've been meeting regularly with FHWA, TDOT, WeGo, and other partners to discuss the data and what's available, how to monitor it, and how to use it to analyze traffic congestion across the system's roadways. And so we've developed an inventory that really details out these measures and how they're going to be utilized, including the time, whether we're looking at future or forecasted conditions, as well as the level of geography that they will be applied at. And so documented within the memo is not only an overview of all these core data sets and resources that we're utilizing, and a lot of this revolves around consistent and reliable data so that we can compare changes over time, not only on the interstate system, but also the transit system and other components of the network. It also describes how these data sets are going to be used as inputs into some of our modeling tools that we can use to estimate existing conditions, as well as forecasting the future performance of the system based on growth and development. It also indicates how these data sets are going to be applied to the CMP. And so, as I mentioned, kind of focusing on how we're defining congestion, identifying the causes, as well as evaluating some of the effectiveness of the actions. Also contained within this memo is some of the time frames and frequencies that this data is updated, whether it's monthly, annually, or based on an RTP development cycle. And then it also references the number of kind of the increasing number of system monitoring tools that we have available. I mentioned the one on our data portal on the previous slide, but also some of the dashboards that we've been working on to so that you can explore some of the observe travel speeds and congestion trends that we're analyzing as well. And then it also notes the partner roles and responsibilities in preparing, sharing, as well as analyzing a number of these data sources. And then kind of the end of the memo includes the components that are within the data matrix. So it's pretty complete data inventory matrix, spelling out the data, what mode it applies to, kind of the dimensions of congestion that it's looking at, as well as the geography that's being applied to throughout the region. And so this is the first draft of this data collection and system monitoring framework. And we look to present or prepare a final draft and present that along with the update to the regional transportation plan. The second technical memo is the Toolbox of strategies. And so this is an overview. This memo kind of provides an overview of how we intend to carry out step 6 of the CMP process. That step being to identify and assess some of the congestion mitigation strategies to solve some of the problems within the region. And staff has also worked with partners to expand this inventory of potential strategies and seeking opportunities to mitigate congestion problems in the region. Documented within this memo is an overview of those strategies. I think we've streamlined. I think we had kind of 5 category types of strategies that we've streamlined down to these 4 that you see on the screen. The first one being manage travel demand, and this really attempts to address congestion at the root of the problem of reducing the number of vehicles on the road, and that could be by fewer single occupancy vehicle trips, or avoiding peak hours, or supporting land use development that reduces demand for automobile travel. And so some of those example strategies that we have more detailed in the matrix in the back of the memo are employer-based programs that encourage telecommuting or flexible work schedules, congestion pricing to encourage travel outside of the peak periods, as well as growth management or TOD policies that manage development and minimize the demand on the transportation system. The second category or second type is improve operations, and this is more geared towards improving the supply side of the transportation system to make sure that the system is operating as efficiently as possible. Examples of improving operations would be intersection upgrades, access management improvements, reversible lanes, traffic signal improvements, and other ITS improvements to help optimize the system. The third is a shift to alternative modes. So this would be improving access to alternative modes that could reduce the burden placed on the roadways. Expanding choices could, what we mean by expanding choices is beyond just driving alone. And this could be through transit service improvements, managed lanes throughout the system, or increased bicycle and pedestrian facilities across the network. Lastly, the fourth would be increased roadway capacity. And this is more used as a last resort within the toolbox of strategies, but this would involve expanding the physical capacity of a roadway to provide relief for traffic congestion. And I think, oftentimes that relief is short-lived, given induced demand that can, that additional capacity can often generate. And so a lot of these capacity examples would include, new roadway projects or road widening projects. Also in this memo, we identify ways of assessing these potential strategies, and then similar to on the data side, we inventory those strategies along with characteristics associated with each of those strategies, things like the type of the benefit, cost level, implementation time frame, key implementers to advance those strategies, and how they connect or tie into some of the objectives and performance measures that we've identified in the policy framework. So this one's also a first draft of this toolbox of strategies, and we'll be working towards a final draft that we can present with the completed RTP. Third tech memo that we have outlines how we intend to carry out step 8 of the CMP process, which is to evaluate the effectiveness of the process and the related congestion management strategies that we are implementing. And so this is kind of a key feedback loop as part of an ongoing CMP process. Documented within this memo is some of the potential strategies or potential methods to evaluate strategies. Some examples that we've provided are, providing progress reports on performance measures, such as what's been done with vital signs reports on an annual basis, maintaining some of the data dashboards and mapping portals through the GNRC data portal, conducting attitudinal surveys of public opinions to get a better understanding of how attitudes towards traffic congestion have changed over time. Also conducting pilot projects to evaluate strategies before they're fully deployed. This could include examples like the I-24 Smart Corridor. And then also another one that was identified was encouraging project sponsors to conduct before and after studies, which is not currently a practice, but another way that we could be evaluating strategies for their effectiveness. Also, within the memo, we've documented the scale that this evaluation would occur at. So whether it's more of a system level or best applied at the corridor or project level or community level. And then it notes the importance of the partners' roles and responsibilities in preparing, sharing, and analyzing these data sources to be able to conduct the evaluation. And so this one's also a first draft of the evaluation framework, and we'll look to work towards a final draft to be presented along with the regional transportation plan. And so today we would be looking for your initial endorsement on these draft items. So these technical memos related to steps 4, 6, and 8. And just to give kind of a context of the status update of where what we still have remaining. So steps 1 through 2 and 3 endorsed back in January. Today, with your endorsement to continue moving forward, we would be making progress towards steps 4, 6, and 8. And largely the remaining step would be step 7, program and implement strategies. And when we get into the update on the RTP schedule, we can talk about how this process will be carried out over the coming months to get a fiscally constrained plan endorsed by October. So with that, I can answer any questions, and we would ask just for a motion to endorse these 3 items related to the CMP.
Are there any questions for staff on this? I'm sure you all understand this, but I just want to make sure to just reiterate this, that the CMP is our last item to come into compliance with FHWA on our certification review. And the congestion management process is not always a standalone document. I mean, MPOs around the country have implemented this in different ways into their regional transportation plan. So I just wanted to reiterate that and make sure you all understand that. And what we are asking for today is a motion to endorse the 3 items that have been discussed with the congestion management process to incorporate them into our regional transportation plan. So do I have a motion?
Of course you have a motion. Well,
You want your arbitrage yield.
Thanks, Mayor Moore. Do I have a second?
Second by Mayor Brown.
Thanks, Mayor Brown. And any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item B, which is to endorse the candidate project list for the regional transportation plan. And honestly, this is, I think, the real meat of what we're doing and what is so important to each one of our communities. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Anna.
Thanks so much, Mayor Reed, and hi, everyone. As Mayor Reed said, I'm going to walk you through some statistics related to the requests we received during our call for projects for the Regional Transportation Plan, and we'll also do some initial breaking down of what the region is looking to implement over the next 25 years per the applications we received from you. So we received 350 project submissions during the call. And those came from about 30 different local government or agency sponsors across the 7 counties that make up the MPO planning area. All told, the region's wish list at this time totals about $7 billion. And of course, that's in present day value. With inflation factored in, those same requests would likely cost around $10 billion total to implement in the years in which the sponsors are estimating they'll actually be expending this funding. If everyone can make sure they're muted, that would be great. It's also definitely worth mentioning here that this list does not yet include some of the larger items we've discussed as a region in recent years, such as some of the big regional corridor, downtown interstate projects that are contained in the current long-range plan. And when we add those to the list, it significantly increases the total cost of all needs. Okay, so staff has given each project request submitted a label to define its project type that looks to the main objective of each project, and we've broken that down on this slide. By far our largest category includes new roadway infrastructure and widening requests, with roadway modernization and maintenance coming in at a distant second. That roadway modernization category also includes items like sidewalk projects. It's followed by intersection and interchange improvement projects, many of which focus on safety and operational improvements, and as well as public transportation related investments. Okay, we can move along. Thank you. This slide depicts the 3 major time horizons in which sponsors indicated they would intend to implement projects submitted for the plan. Considerations that might affect a local agency's decision making here would include things like whether that local agency would expect to have required local matching funds for the project available, when they might have the time and resources to pursue a given project, and then of course any other projects they may have underway that a requested project would be affected by or dependent upon. So here we have in the dark blue projects in the 2025 or short-term horizon, many of which are already funded in one way or another currently and are possibly even already underway. In the orange, we have the 2035 or midterm horizon. It's also our most popular time frame. And then in the light blue is the 2045 or long-term horizon, which is our most expensive horizon, if you will. A lot of the projects in that horizon group are some of our bigger ticket items, things we know we need to address or would like to address at some point, but in many cases we're unsure how we would fund or implement those things. We can move along. This graph shows the distribution of the number of project requests by county, so that's the number of projects and not the dollar amount of those projects. As you can see, we received the most requests from Wilson County, followed by Davidson and Sumner. I think that's likely reflective of the growth that those counties have seen in recent years. We also have some multi-county and regional requests where you're likely to see projects that address things like transit and our regional commuter corridors. Next. This slide is showing the various cost ranges of project submissions we've received. These costs are as estimated by the sponsor applying for the project, and they're in present day value, so this does not represent the potential for inflation. The majority of projects being requested are projected to cost less than $10 million, with a 10 to 25 million range following that. We do have 8 $100 million plus project requests in the region, and those include a variety of things ranging from major overhauls to existing corridors to new roadways to public transportation related improvements. And our next steps. So as staff continues to organize and cull through all these project submissions, our next major step has been to begin to meet with all of you on a county by county basis to discuss and refine these applications and to review our evaluation methodology and regional prioritization process. When we move on to round 2 of these meetings, you'll get to take a look at the preliminary evaluation results for your projects, and we'll also be able to discuss together any changes to project scope that may result from that analysis. And then finally in round 3, we'll sort of fine-tune things as they relate to project costs and scheduling, and we'll also get some feedback from you regarding local prioritization and projects in the hope that we can work toward a fiscally constrained project list that reflects those priorities. So here is a look at the schedule for the round 1 meetings with all project applicants. We've held these meetings already with Wilson and Rutherford counties, and we will be meeting with Sumner County tomorrow. Then we've got a full plate next week as we'll look to meet with the remaining counties in the MPO planning area. Move along. Oh, thank you. The full list of candidate project applications as they were submitted is accessible along with the rest of the materials for this meeting at the link that's been provided. We do want to reiterate that this is not the final fiscally constrained list. It's just all project applications as we receive them. So this list will continue to be fine-tuned over the course of our county workshop meetings as we seek those further clarifications and discuss any projects that multiple sponsors may be interested in and may be altered due to those conversations. And moving along. Okay, so for the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan, as a matter of policy, we'll continue to set aside funds in groupings targeted at specific programs that include active transportation, transit and technology, the Job Access and Reverse Commute Program, the Enhanced Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program, and then one for ADA improvements. We'll also be including as candidate projects some of the larger scale efforts that have been recommended as a result of our regional planning activities. These are things such as the downtown interstate loop and modernization, as well as high capacity transit for our regional corridors. Moving along again. Okay, so today's request will be to endorse the candidate list in order to finalize the call for projects and to establish the universe of projects that will be evaluated and prioritized for funding made available between 2021 and 2025. This includes, of course, TDOT projects, municipal and county projects, transit projects, and regional priorities. And then finally, Okay, so one of the items we've also been introducing in our round one workshops with each county is a pairwise exercise that we'll be conducting in the Decision Lens software we acquired to help us with various aspects of the long-range plan process. And in this exercise, each sponsor agency will be asked to rank the importance of each of these metrics against each other, 2 at a time. I think it's about 15 comparison type questions total. The outcome of this exercise will inform our prioritization process by helping us to assign weights to project features that correlate with each of the metrics that you see here on this slide. Again, your TCC members will be taking a look at this, and we definitely encourage each of you to have a discussion with them regarding how you want to respond as an agency and which of these items are truly the most important priorities for your locality. And with that, I will send it back to Mayor Reed for endorsement of the candidate project list.
Are there questions or discussions for Anna on this?
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
This is Preston Elliott with TDOT. I had a question. Anna, could you go back to slide, I think it was, well, it might be here 32 or 33. So what is the action item today?
It's just to endorse our candidate project list, which is just kind of signifying a formal close to our call for projects and solidifies the list of candidates that we're going to be looking at and evaluating for the long range plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Mayor Reed, Victor Lay here from Spring Hill.
Yes, sir.
Question for Anna. You mentioned the meetings that are being scheduled for the counties, for Williamson County. Have those times already been set, or?
Yeah, each of the meetings that we're having is being held from 10 to 2. So all of the dates or 10 to 12, I'm sorry. So all of the dates that you saw listed, all of those meetings are being held from 10 a.m. to noon.
And are they Zoom meetings or are they in-person meetings?
We're holding them on this Microsoft Teams platform, exactly what we're using for this meeting right now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to endorse the candidate list of projects for the Regional Transportation Plan?
Motion.
And can you state your name?
Kenny Martin.
Thanks, Kenny. Do we have a second?
Second,
I'll
Victor
second.
Lay.
Thank you. Any other discussion or question? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We're now going to move on to item 4, which is our informational items. The first thing I want to do is an update to our regional transportation plan process. And I kind of want to give you all an update since we all had our meeting last time. I want to thank Commissioner Bright and his leadership team for meeting with GNRC and some of our Transportation Policy Board leadership to have a discussion about the plan moving forward. And everybody's aware, between the tornadoes and the COVID-19, you know, we've had considerable update to our schedule and the regional transportation plan. The federal plan requires that we update every 5 years. Unlucky for us, it kind of fell right during this whole COVID-19 situation that we're going through. And so our next update is in February of 2021. And at the meeting, we let TDOT know that we were not asking for an extension, but we were asking them if they, along with Federal Highway, would consider doing a concurrent compliance review on our draft plan, that would help us make up quite a bit of time. And I cannot tell you how appreciative we are that they have agreed to do this. For those of you that have not been through this process, or because we only have to do it every 5 years, you may not remember, usually in the past, that process of review has taken about 4 to 5 months. So them doing this concurrently will really significantly cut it down, hopefully to a 2-month period that will include the 30-day compliance review, and then a few weeks for staff to prepare any of the necessary revisions that have to be incorporated. Now, at the meeting with TDOT, we also talked about a few things that kind of come into play with us updating this plan in February. I want you all to understand that for us to get this done by February, it's going to be somewhat of a basic plan. You know, we all got together and met last October with stakeholders in the community. And I'll be honest, I left that meeting in October really excited about all of the collaboration that was going to take place with the stakeholders. So because of what all has taken place over the last couple of months, I don't think the plan is going to be exactly what we were hoping for in regards to our outreach strategy. We also know that it's not going to do a lot to advance the transportation priorities that the Mayor's Caucus has discussed with the governor and key members of the legislature over the last year. Our public involvement is going to have to be streamlined and really a virtual engagement. And we're going to have to get in touch with our key community and business partners and those stakeholders to let them know that our plan is somewhat of a scaled back strategy, just so they understand that it's not because of a lack of vision. And we want them to understand that their input is important, but because of the scaled back timeline, we're not able to do the plan on the scale that we were hoping to. Also, final recommendations on the ongoing studies that GNRC is doing and TDOT is doing and any of our other partners would be deferred until the next plan update. And also the plan would assume that no new local or state funding beyond the Improve Act and otherwise required to match federal grants are included. But I do want you to understand the conservative financial forecast provides approximately $10 billion of funding over the next 25 years. So it is still a significant amount of money that we as a board have to allocate. And that's why I say that this is so important to each one of our communities. It is an important job that we have to look at these projects once they are evaluated and ranked and decide which ones to fund. Since our meeting with TDOT, staff has updated the schedule, and I have asked them to share that schedule today so you all know exactly where we are and what we as a board have to do to meet these deadlines and what role we play in the decision-making process. So, Sean, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the schedule of the remaining activities to complete this 5-year update of the Regional Transportation Plan.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. So if you had an opportunity to look through the update schedule in the packet, it details a number of the items that we've made progress on to date, as well as a number of the remaining activities. I think just one thing to note is it is a full schedule in the coming months, and it does ask a lot of staff as well as members and of the board and their staff over the coming months in order to complete these remaining activities. The way that we've kind of categorized a number or the type of work is by some of the upcoming board actions, some of the partner coordination that's necessary, some of the public outreach, technical work that staff and some of the consultants will be doing, as well as some of the information that we'll be presenting at upcoming TCC and Transportation Policy Board meetings, as well as the compliance review with the state and federal partners. And so some of the upcoming tasks, we mentioned some of the informational items that we'll be presenting. Obviously today you'll hear about safety as one of those key topic areas and some of the trends and issues related to that. And then in the following upcoming month, future presentations on equity and environment. And so that would be one item, but I think the focus of a lot of work would pertain to reviewing, evaluating, and prioritizing the transportation needs, or that candidate list of projects that you heard from Anna on, and working through that list to get to a more prioritized list that is fiscally constrained based on the amount of money that we have available over the life of the plan. And that being a core component, and we'll talk through some of the steps involved in that. And then lastly, just another main task will be discussing and setting some of the policy goals and performance targets to strive for through some of the upcoming board actions. So some of the remaining activities, as we broke them down by these categories, obviously the reviewing and evaluating of projects to get to a prioritized list spans a number of these, spans not only the technical work and staff getting some of the cost estimates validated, as well as evaluating and assessing some of those projects, and then identifying kind of the eligible funding sources and the scheduling of those projects based on available revenue. But also, as Anna mentioned, the partner coordination being a key component. And so having that first round of county level workshops to begin to QC some of those projects and identify any discrepancies on the front end so that we're able to continue on with these subsequent steps. And then working with your staff as well over the coming months in rounds 2 and 3 of those workshops to flesh out those projects and priorities. As I mentioned, we'll be discussing roadway safety today, and then upcoming presentations on environment and social equity, and then some of the important upcoming board decisions as well to get to that fiscally constrained or cost feasible list. And so this the schedule also identifies a number of these activities occurring over the coming months with the goal of getting a draft regional transportation plan document endorsed in October at the October meeting. So be busy upcoming months, but we think that with the help of you and your staff, we can make it through these remaining activities as part of the schedule. Is there any questions that folks have regarding the schedule?
Thanks, Sean. There's no action that's necessary today. I just wanted to let you all know what is left for us to be able to complete this. I also want you all to know that it is absolutely a group effort on so many different agencies to make this happen. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the team effort that's going into this. I know on our end with staff, they have worked tirelessly on this. I am sure that the others have as well. but I need each one of you in your communities to step up and do your part in making sure that we can keep the schedule on track. And again, allocating this amount of money is going to make a real difference for each one of our communities. So I want to thank everybody who's been involved in moving this process forward. If there are no questions or comments to that, then we will move on to item B, which is the presentation of our roadway safety conditions and trends. And Sean, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. I'll just provide a quick overview on safety before turning it over to Ashley Reeves, who's going to go through a lot of the key trends and interesting data that we have to present to you today. So just a quick background on safety and why this topic matters. This one I think doesn't require as much convincing as some of the other topic categories. Safety is often, of paramount importance and one of the top ranked goal categories, consistently as we've updated the plan process in the past. I think, everyone can agree that it is important because it impacts people's lives, in various ways, not only in the loss of life. Over the last 5 years, we've averaged nearly 200 fatalities a year on the region's roadway system. And in addition to fatalities, there's a number of serious injuries as well that can lead to health impacts and long-term disabilities for folks that are impacted by those crashes. There's also an economic impact associated with it, not only in lost productivity but also in economic costs as well of motor vehicle crashes. According to some of the figures that we've seen through the CDC, it costs the state nearly $165 million each year in economic costs related to motor vehicle crashes. And then also it can restrict access to opportunities by, if there's unsafe conditions on the roadway, it can discourage users from making certain daily trips, especially for those folks that don't have access to a personal automobile. And one other thing is, this is tied to a number of federal requirements that we'll dive into. Not only is the national safety goal to achieve a significant reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries on public roads, but there's a number of stakeholders involved in carrying out different elements to make that happen. One is the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is a statewide coordinated safety plan to provide a comprehensive framework for reducing fatalities and serious injuries. There's also Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, which is specifically designated to plan, evaluate, implement, and report on safety improvement projects within the region. And then what you all are probably most familiar with is the setting of performance measure targets, which we've updated annually for the 5 measures that you see to track progress towards the achievement of those targets. And then one emerging requirement that's coming down the pipeline as well is, similar on public transit agency safety plans and some future performance measure targets associated with that. Similar to the policy brief on congestion, we are preparing a policy brief on roadway safety with similar objectives to the congestion, not only providing a background on safety, but really trying to provide a better understanding of what the causes of crashes are and safety issues are in the region. And then also documenting some of that existing crash data and trends across the region, breaking it down by type of crash, by mode, and by severity. And then identifying some of the safety emphasis areas or crash hotspots, high crash locations throughout the region that we need to elevate the importance of and prioritize for improving safety in the region. Some of the key issues and challenges when it comes to safety, the region's poor walkability and has impacted pedestrian safety, especially in recent years. And so having a limited sidewalk network and disconnected infrastructure across the region can create unsafe conditions for vulnerable users like pedestrians. Also, the rapid population and economic growth. There's more people on the roadways, more daily trips on the transportation system, and that can increase opportunities for conflict between users, whether vehicles or non-motorized users. And then limited transportation options, limited alternative to traveling by personal automobile can lead to more cars on the road and also increase the opportunities for conflict between users. And then also dealing with an increasingly complex environment. I think since the update of our last plan, there's been a rise in micro-mobility and ride-sharing services, which is kind of complicating the roadway environment, particularly downtown, and introducing new roadway safety issues. But also the increase in growth and development has also led to more work zones, which is also complicates and can exacerbate some of the safety issues for various modes. So crashes can be attributed to multiple risk factors. Some of the ones that we've identified here include roadway attributes or the built environment, infrastructure design, user behavior, or also external factors like weather and in work zones. And these factors can overlap with one another, and so understanding how they are associated, I think we can better help identify and address some of the safety problems within the region. Starting with the roadway attributes, these consist of kind of conflict points within the system, like interchanges, intersections, at-grade crossings, where vehicles conflict with other vehicles as they merge or change lanes at an interchange, or at intersections where vehicles are likely to conflict with pedestrians crossing the street. And so you'll see it as we go through the presentation. A number of these conflict points that we'll identify are things that you've seen in the congestion presentations, because there's a strong overlap with the congested areas as well as the high crash areas. For driver behavior, another factor that impacts safety across the system, drivers can be distracted or impaired. That increases the likelihood of a crash. And then there's also emphasis areas, which certain population groups like seniors or young drivers that are consistently overrepresented in crash data is where we've focused some attention as well. And then external factors, as we mentioned, weather, work zones, or other external factors that can impact safety by reducing visibility, making it more difficult to stop quickly, or also just causing sudden changes in speed can increase the safety risks across the system. So just highlighting some of those conflict points within the system. The first one we have are interchange locations where vehicles have to merge, and it can be a common site of crashes throughout the region. There are approximately 100 interchanges across the region, and you'll see in the upcoming maps they're a common site of crashes across the region. Another are intersections, another planned point of conflict within the system and impacts multiple modes. Intersection crashes account for approximately 1/3 of all crashes within the region. There are more than 37,000 intersections in the region, and approximately 3,300 of those are signalized intersections, traffic signals. And so although that only makes up about 9% of all of the intersections, that's an area that is going to be represented in the upcoming crash maps. And then lastly, at-grade crossings, another point of conflict, this one more likely between trains and vehicles. These crashes are not that common, but these crashes tend to be quite severe and have a high potential to result in a serious injury or fatality. And there are more than 700 at-grade rail crossings in the region, and about 20% of them are gated. And so another area to consider as we look to address some of the safety concerns within the region. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ashley, and she's going to take you through a number of the regional trends, showing you some maps, charts, and figures related to crashes by severity, as well as crashes by mode, by type of collision, and by emphasis area. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Here we're looking at the annual crash totals for the state as well as the MPO down below in dark blue. Both trends have remained fairly consistent over the past 5-year period. I want to note that in the MPO, we contain about 25% of the state's population, and we account for about 30% of the crashes each year. Next slide. Here we have a map of crash locations. One individual gray dot represents one crash. Although these aren't necessarily recurring, there are at least 197 crashes per day. Next slide. Here we're looking at the geographic distribution of crashes. The crashes are largely along major interstates, corridors, and interchanges. Next slide. And here we're looking at the annual totals for fatalities year to year for the state as well as for the MPO. Roughly 20% of the state's total fatalities occur in the MPO region. We have a similar trend to the state as well. We are both increasing. Next slide. Here we're looking at the distribution of fatal crashes, and these tend to be more random in nature. You'll notice there are 943 total fatal crashes, but that involves 1,001 fatalities, so people in each of those crashes. So that basically equivalates to over the last 5 years, we have lost a life every other day due to traffic incidents. Accidents that are typically more fatal are ones that involve an impaired driver, a driver that's been speeding, head-on collisions, or crashes that involve a non-motorist like a bicyclist or pedestrian. Next slide. Here we look at fatality rates for the nation, the state, as well as the MPO region. You can see the nation and the state are both trending downward, and unfortunately the MPO region is trending upwards. Forecasts for the 2045 VMT show vehicle miles traveled as increasing, and this could end up leading to a higher rate in the future. Next slide. Here's another way to slice and dice the information. Here you can look at the region as compared to the state as well as the nation, but you can also see how the counties within the MPO compare to those as well. Next slide. Here we're looking at annual totals of serious injuries. I want to go ahead and note the sharp decline between 2017 and 2018. As we've mentioned before, that's likely due to the change in definition. Roughly 20% of the state serious injuries are occurring within the MPO and are trending downward. Next slide. Here we have the geographic distribution of serious injury crashes. These tend to occur along major corridors, principal arterials, as well as the inner loop. Typically, crashes that result in a serious injury lead to at least one lane closure, and this can lead to congestion as well. Next slide. Here we're looking at the serious injury rate for the MPO as compared to the number of serious injuries for the MPO. You'll notice that the left-hand side of the scale corresponds to the number of serious injuries that goes with the light blue line, and the scale to the right goes with serious injury rate, which just corresponds to the gray line, and both of these are trending downward. Next slide. And again, here you can compare the MPO to the state as well as each of the counties within the MPO to the state as well. Next slide. Here we're looking at annual totals for non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. The state is dropping and the region is remaining fairly consistent. Unfortunately, before this meeting, I wasn't able to obtain a 2019 number, but we do plan to fill that in as soon as we get it. Next slide. When we look at the geographic distribution of pedestrian crashes, we notice that a large portion of these occur in urban centers, downtown, and near the West End. Next slide. And bike crashes have a similar pattern to pedestrians, but more concentrated downtown, where there are a lot of cars, there's a lot of people, and probably a lack of facilities. Next slide. Looking at commercial truck crashes, you'll notice these are heavily along interstates and principal arterials, and you will also notice that I-65 north through downtown to I-24 east being the heaviest. Next slide. And here we look at motorcycle crashes. These are typically much more severe, a little bit more widespread, but what was interesting is when I looked at motorcycle crashes by vehicle miles traveled, it really started to highlight the US 31 corridor going through Murray County. Next slide. Now we're going to start looking at crashes by severity by mode. And what you'll notice as you get from into more severe crashes, you'll notice that pedestrians and bicyclists and motorcyclists make up a larger share of the more severe crashes. This is likely due to non-motorists and motorcycles not having as much protection against another vehicle. Commercial trucks, just because of their sheer size, cause a lot of damage. And you'll notice that passenger vehicles make up a large percentage, but that's just because we have a large number of passenger vehicles on the roadway. Next slide. Here we look at crashes by collision type. We highlighted these 4 collision types because in the MPO region, these 4 types make up a large portion of serious injuries and fatalities in the region. You'll notice that rear ends are much more frequent and head-on collisions are not as frequent. Next slide. Here we look at the geographic distribution of rear-end crashes. These are more frequent, they are less severe, and typically result in property damage only. They occur near intersections, and this type of crash accounts for over 1/3 of crashes in the region. Here we show the geographic distribution of head-on collisions. These tend to be less frequent, but much more severe. These only make up about 2% of crashes in the region. Next slide. Speeding crashes typically result in a fatality or are much more fatal. I-24 East is a major hotspot. Next slide. Here we're looking at crashes by collision type. And what I really want to highlight is, like I said on the previous slide, head-on collisions only account for 2% of crashes in our region, but yet they account for 10% of the fatalities. Next slide. Here we get into crashes by emphasis areas. Emphasis areas we define as senior drivers, so drivers over the age of 65, young drivers ages 15 to 24, distracted drivers, and impaired drivers. And I do want to note that one crash can involve multiple emphasis areas. You can have a distracted senior driver hitting a young impaired driver or any combination of those. So I just wanted to note that. Next slide. Here we're looking at the geographic distribution of senior-involved crashes. These typically occur during daytime hours, and these oftentimes occur near medical offices. Next slide. Young driver crashes pretty much occur everywhere. They're typically, though, more concentrated around universities such as Vanderbilt, TSU, MTSU, areas where that demographic is really attractive towards. Next slide. Distracted crashes are more widespread geographically, and they only account for 9% of crashes, but I want to note that that number is probably highly underreported just because of the difficulty with catching distracted drivers. Next slide. Here we're looking at the geographic distribution of impaired crashes. These occur downtown and near urban centers. These typically occur during the weekend nights, but these also occur during happy hours like Monday through Friday, 4 to 7. We see a spike in impaired crashes as well. Next slide. And here what I really want to point out is, like I said on a previous slide, that impaired crashes only account for 3% of the crashes in the region, but yet they're accounting for 40% of the fatalities. Next slide. Here is just another way to look at crashes. We broke down the corridors and interstates into an inner, middle, and outer ring, and that will make more sense once I get to the next slide. Here we've created interstate corridor profiles, and what this ultimately allows you to do is compare Interstate 65 north to I-65 south, or to I-65 north to I-24 east, or various corridors, but it also lets you compare the different segments within one section of the interstate. So we can look at I-65 North's inner section, middle, and outer. We can look at that for crashes, serious injuries, as well as fatalities. Next slide. But we want to be fair to sections of interstates that are typically longer so that we don't have bias to shorter interstates or shorter sections. So we did crashes per mile. So you can see that the section of I-65 North in its intersection has 544.1 crashes per mile. And you can see that same information by severity for serious injuries as well as fatalities. And you can also see the percentage of truck crashes that occur on that section as well. Next slide. We wanted to do something similar for principal arterials. Here we have crashes per mile, as well as the percentage of crashes that resulted in a serious injury or fatality, the percentage of crashes that involved the truck, percentage of crashes that involved the non-motorist. And we also wanted to give information to add context to that. So we also put in average speed that vehicles are traveling on that arterial, intersections per mile, transit stops per mile, and bicycle and pedestrian coverage, so that you can see on State Route 24 Charlotte Pike, there were 504 crashes per mile. 1.3% of those crashes involved a serious injury or a fatality, 2.1% involved a truck, and 1.5% involved a non-motorist. And to put that into context, we can see that on Charlotte Pike, there's 54% bicycle coverage and 51% pedestrian coverage. Next slide. We did the same sort of thing with the total number of crashes and truck crashes and motorcycle crashes, but we also wanted to put it in terms of rate so that we didn't have bias towards arterials that have more vehicle miles traveled on those segments. And we also just kept the raw numbers for pedestrians and bicycle crashes. Next slide. Here we take you downtown. You can see the downtown inner loop where there are interchanges that are really closely spaced, or where you tend to see a lot of crashes occurring. Next slide. And here we're showing pedestrian crashes. You can see that those typically occur in the dense urban area near Vanderbilt and West End. Next slide. Now we're going to take you to downtown Murfreesboro, where you can see that interchanges are, again, another hotspot for crashes, as well as Broad Street between Old Fort Parkway and Main Street. Next slide. Here we look at pedestrian crashes, and we see something similar that we saw to downtown. You see it in the downtown urban center, as well as the Stones River Mall area, where you typically have a lot of people out walking around. Next slide. Here we highlighted the top 5% congested corridors, and we overlaid those with the top 5% most frequent crash areas. And we did this to really show the connection, or rather the relationship, between recurring and non-recurring congestion. Some corridors that are experiencing a lot of congestion and other issues are also seeing safety issues as well. And this brings us really to highlighting the individual safety profiles that we had developed for each of the counties in order to look at those a little bit more closely and to understand the trends and issues that are happening within each of the counties. Because we all understand that sometimes downtown or sometimes city centers can sort of wash out other counties. And so it's kind of nice to look at those individually. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sean.
Great, thank you, Ashley. I think, there were a couple of questions that came up during Ashley's presentation. I think we can address most of those questions. I think the one about the percent of crashes that involve a fatality, we can get the exact numbers, but I think it's safe to say it's less than 1% of all of the crashes. I think one other important point to note that I think Ashley touched upon is the serious injury crashes looked like they were trending in the downward direction, but it's also important to note that the definition in serious injuries has changed during that 5-year period of data, and so that is one of the factors for why you've seen the drop off in serious injuries. Just to note quickly, some of the key findings that we said or that we have initially plucked out from the analysis of the data involve just the overall need to reduce traffic fatalities, not trending in the right direction when it comes to traffic fatalities in the region, and downtown interstate loop being a key problem, and that resurfaces on a number of those maps, and so the need to address the conditions and minimize some of the conflicts that currently exist in the downtown interstate loop. Also highlighting the major corridors and the need to modernize a number of those major corridors, some of the old pikes in and out of Nashville, to allow for safe access for all users of the transportation system. Also a focus on reducing non-motorized crashes in and around urban centers, so even some of the satellite cities, and notice some of the bicycle and pedestrian crashes being hotspots for non-motorized crashes within those areas. And then also identifying ways to reduce the crash severity at intersections through various strategies to potentially slow down vehicles and minimize the impact that they have on other vehicles or non-motorized users of the system. One thing that is important to note, I think we've touched on some of the COVID impacts and emerging trends with congestion, and plan to do so with the other topic areas, but one that we wanted to add to the list as we dove into safety was there's also been an increase in crash severity despite a reduction in crashes since traffic patterns have changed dramatically since mid-March. And so we'll utilize some of the information that we received from Patrick Dolan at the Department of Tennessee Department of Safety, just to highlight those trends. So one is just the number of crashes, a roughly 1/3 decrease in crashes when looking at March 16th to June 17th and comparing it to what had occurred prior in previous years, so 2020 comparison versus the previous 5 years. And so despite a reduction in crashes, we've seen an increase in fatalities. So utilizing that comparison since March to the previous time periods in previous years, we see more than a 1/3 increase in fatalities. And then we also see an increase in non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries as well, comparing 2020 to 2017 through 2019. And so I think these are interesting trends that we're continuing to monitor to see how they play out, and kind of what the impact is on changing traffic patterns, and as people are able to drive faster, we've seen that the severity of those crashes is increasing despite a reduction in the frequency of those crashes. The last thing I'll plug is just that we have, similar to the congestion, we're putting this data available online so that you can explore. You can look at crash locations, you can filter by roadway or county or severity, time of day, day of week, and so really cool information. If you, Ashley's maps sparked some interest, you can continue to explore on your own time. So with that, we can take any questions regarding safety. Otherwise, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Seeing no questions, I just want to remind you all that that staff will present the roadway safety performance targets for our consideration at next month's meeting, and that these targets kind of set ambitious objectives that will align with our goals to improve safety and help guide the annual performance measure targets as part of the federally required performance-based planning. I know this information has been a ton to digest today. I encourage you to go back and look at it again. And if you have questions, I'm sure that Sean or Ashley would be happy to answer those questions as you review all of the information. I think you can see that quite a bit of work has gone into this presentation and gathering this data, and we really appreciate all of the work that you all have done. At this point, I will move into our regular reports. And Preston, I'm assuming you're going to do TDOTs today?
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. And thank you to staff. I think it was a really great, detailed information on congestion management process, as well as the plan update and as well as the safety data. I also want to thank you, Mayor Reed, and the other mayors for meeting with the commissioner and I and others last month to set a schedule that can meet the February 2021 deadline. So I really appreciate that. Just a couple of items, a couple of exciting things. One, I just wanted to mention, I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, that the multimodal access grant for the 2020-2021 cycle is still open. We're collecting notices of intent to apply through the end of this month, through July 31st. And then what we'll do is we'll send out in late August the full applications, which would be due in October. The scoring process would be done by the end of the year, and then we would be looking to announce awards sometime like early February of 2021. Again, these grants are have a ceiling up to $950,000, and they're a 95% state, 5% local match. So just wanted to reiterate that. And some exciting news on the CMAQ program. So I think most of you are aware that the Nashville region, along with Shelby County of Memphis, Knoxville, and Chattanooga are the 4 geographies that are eligible for the CMAQ funds. And so our 2019 call for projects, we had about 26 applications, and from statewide from those geographies, and of those 13 were selected. And in the Nashville area, I think there were 13 submitted out of the 26, and we will be sending out letters later this week to 7 communities within the Nashville MPO area. So some communities will be receiving some CMAQ funds for programs that were submitted. I think that's all I have, unless there's anything of me that you may have.
Preston, this is Faye DeMassimo. Quick question. Do you know yet when the 2020 CMAQ call for projects you plan for that to occur?
Sorry, I had muted myself there. I think our schedule is pretty similar to how it has been in the past. So what we'll do is once we make these awards here, we'll reopen the process for the CMAQ. Trying to see, I don't have that in front of me at the moment. But it's basically the same cycle and schedule that we've had in the past.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else for Preston? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the chair's report. I talked to you all last time about proposed revisions to the Transportation Policy Board bylaws, and those have been included in your packet. And the slide you see in front of you now is the MPO Planning Oversight Committee roster. And we met on June 15th and proposed revisions to our Transportation Policy Board bylaws included elimination of a longstanding requirement that the MPO sponsor agency, who is now GNRC, receive formal concurrence from the Planning Oversight Committee in order to pay our consultant invoices that are related to activities included in the approved Unified Planning Work Program. And the proposed revision would replace the requirement with a monthly report from staff on the progress of these activities, as well as adding language that regarding virtual meetings. And we're looking at adoption of these in August. And then after, we would ask that deferral until after our February plan adoption, that we have discussion about the extended voting membership to municipalities of less than 5,000 people. Now, there's no action that is necessary for this today. The revisions to the bylaws can be approved only after a first reading and then a deferral of action to the subsequent meeting. So the earliest we would be asked to take action on this is August. But included in your packet are those revisions, and I just wanted to make sure that you all had those. And if you have any comment or questions for staff, we are happy to answer those. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our staff report.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. The only thing I'll mention is that we, just a reminder that we have a UPWP amendment that will push the action on the UPWP amendment to next month's meeting. But we wanted to just give you a reminder that that we have that out there. One thing I also mentioned, I know there's been a lot of interest and questions regarding the safety information. I'll just reiterate that we do have a lot of the safety information available online. If you go to gnrc.org/dashboards, that's where you can access some congestion data as well as the crash data. We also included in the packet the county safety profiles that we prepared, which is another great resource, that, you know, kind of taking a lot of the work that Max and Ashley and the data team have done at the regional level and broken it down further to the county level. And, you know, if you're interested in corridor or further, you know, feel free to reach out to us. But I think those are all good resources to continue to explore more on your own. And I'll also send around the what Preston had mentioned about the multimodal access grant. I'll just send around the link and a follow-up email to everyone so that you have that information as well. That's all I have.
Great, thanks, Sean. I know that it's been a long meeting today. I know that there's been a ton of information to digest. I can't tell you how much I appreciate each one of you taking the time to be a part of this meeting. I also want to reiterate all of those that are involved in updating our regional transportation plan. I can't thank you enough for being willing to work together to make sure that we get our plan done on time, because ultimately the ones who benefit are the citizens and people who live in the Middle Tennessee region. And so thanks for all you're doing to make this possible. You know, I hoped last month that we would all be meeting in person. That didn't happen. I will hope again that next month we will be able to meet in person, and but if not, we will continue on doing what needs to be done to move these projects forward. So if there is nothing else to come before this board, then we are adjourned.
Thank you.